Are you looking to build your soil? Well, stay tuned because I've got 5 cheap and easy tips on how to do it. Hey guys, my name's Donald and I'm with 𝙒𝘋𝙀𝙊𝙄𝙇 Farms, and we are here to give you 5 cheap and easy tips on how to rebuild your soil. So tip number 1, when you mow your yard, property, or graze it, whatever, you only want to cut 1/3 of the plant. That's going to give the plant a lot more green material left to continue to photosynthesize, rebuild its structures, sequester more carbon, and allow it to grow better. You're not limiting it. You're not stressing it out too much. It's also going to allow more leaf coverage on the soil. The soil being covered is going to cover a couple of things. It's going to regulate temperature. Your soil's not going to get too hot. It's not going to get too dry. It's going to regulate moisture control, and it's going to protect the soil from rain impaction and erosion from water and wind. Very easy. Just cut less of the plant. Tip number 2. When you do cut, mow, graze, wait in between the time you do it. Allow the plant to have a recover period so it can recover from the stress of being cut. Because when you cut the plant, it's basically the root structure. It needs the extra carbon stored in that root structure to regrow. So when it sloughs off that root structure, if you don't give it time to regrow, you're now starting from here when you go to cut it again. So then it's going to slough off more, and it's just going to keep getting shorter and shorter, and your soil under it is going to get more compacted. It's not going to get aerated. You're not going to have the available nutrients for the plant that you need, because you're basically telling the plant to stay at that height, and it's not a healthy plant. And then that goes along with, now the plant's short, the root structure is short, it's not getting nutrients, it's not allowing water penetration because the soil is now compacted, and now it's not covering the soil. Your soil's getting more open, more bare. So now the temperatures are going to go higher. The higher your temperatures, the more dangerous it is for the environmental organisms, the living organisms, that they're going to die off if it gets too hot. It's not going to regulate temperatures. Your water is going to go away because you're not going to be able to retain it. You're not going to be able to keep it, and you're not going to be able to capture it. So that's big issues. Those two will help your yard immensely. Just allowing it a longer period before you cut, and you know when it's time to cut, when that blade of that grass or whatever comes back to a point from being cut. Once it comes to a point, it should be ready for, it should be safe enough for you to cut it again. And then again, only 1/3. That way it's going to allow the plant time to recoup and regrow, and you'll have a better soil, better yard for it too. Tip number 3, the more you follow those first 2 steps, the less chemicals you're going to need, the less fertilizer you're going to need, because the fertilizers are compensating for the nutrients that are not available because the plant's root structures aren't there. So when you give fertilizer to a plant, that fertilizer is in plant soluble form already, meaning there's no conversion needed. And that's what the nutrient cycle does with the microorganisms in the plant. The plant will photosynthesize carbon or CO2, break it apart, release the O2 as oxygen, take the carbon for itself or whatever it needs, and then roughly 30 to 70%, depending on the plant, will go to the root structure. The 30 to 70% of the carbon will go to the root structure. The root structure is going to leak out 𝙒𝘖𝙔𝙎𝙔𝙬, sugars, proteins, carbs, starches, and it's going to attract the microorganisms in the specific ones for the nutrients that those plants need. When you give them fertilizer, that cycle is inhibited because the plants already now have those nutrients that they need or that they want. So they're going to not send out as much of the carbon, which means they're not going to have to replenish as much. So they're not going to sequester as much. And it's going to have excess runoff of nutrients because you're giving the plants what you think they need, not what the plants need. Because the plants don't need nitrogen all the time. They only need it so often. So they're going to attract what they need when they need it. And there's a balance that happens. When you just give fertilizer, that takes that out of balance. And you're going to have excess nutrients, which ends up running off with water. Now, because you don't have water penetration, the water sits. So it's just going to run off. And it's going to take all those nutrients with it, which goes into the watersheds. And then we get dead zones like you have in the Gulf of Mexico and what happened with the Chesapeake Bay and all of that. No, don't use chemicals, don't use fertilizers. Chemicals, same thing. If you use chemicals like pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, insecticides, you're killing the life, which is what the plants need for their nutrient cycle. Now, because you kill the life, well, now you've got to compensate with fertilizer. And if you don't keep doing fertilizer, your plants aren't going to do well. So it's best to just take those two things out and let the nature do it for you. It's going to regulate the nutrients that they need. And it's going to protect the plant itself from diseases and pathogens. The environment does that for you. If you mess with it, it's not going to, you're going to cause actually more issues than get good results. Tip number 4, you want to reduce or eliminate soil disturbance. So tilling, any kind of tilling, you want to stop tilling because you're now breaking up the living environment that the microorganisms have created to sustain themselves and to regulate the nutrient cycle for the plants. Specifically, there's a type of microorganism called mycorrhizal fungi, or fungi, however you want to say it. And it's the little white filaments that go through the soil. And they attach themselves to the plant's roots, which basically allow the plants to have a greater access to water, any kind of nutrients that they need, micronutrients, macronutrients, minerals. But when you till, you are breaking all of that up. And it's essentially going to a neighborhood, a suburban neighborhood, plowing everything down and then expecting them to rebuild. And then as soon as they rebuild, plowing it again. That's what tilling does. You're plowing their neighborhood, expecting that that's helpful. Which, I mean, if you're initially starting an area, the first plow, the first till might be needed, but after that you should never have to till. Plus, the more you till, the more you're compacting below where you till. So if you till the first 4 to 5 inches, the area below it, where you're stepping on and whatever you're using is moving on it, it's compacting that, and it gets, over time, it drops and drops, and you're going to be in a gully on that area that you're tilling. It's also going to allow more bare soil, which is going to deregulate your temperatures. Your soils are going to go, temperatures-wise, are going to go increased. You're going to lose a lot of moisture control, so you're going to have lose a lot of water to evaporation and transpiration, and it's just overall not a healthy system to till. Tip number 5, you want to keep the soil covered at all times. That's one of the best things to do. Mother Nature doesn't like bare soil. That's why if you ever see a bare soil, some type of weed, what we refer to as weeds, grow there quickly, and it's like you're always trying to pull them out. Well, it's Mother Nature wants that bare soil covered to help regulate things that are there. Helps regulate water, again, like we were talking about earlier, helps regulate temperatures, helps regulate the life cycle that's there. If you see something, a weed, it's best to look at the plant and what does it do. For instance, dandelions. If you have a lot of dandelions in your yard, that's an indicator that you have compacted soil because it has a taproot that goes down deep. So it's there to break up your compacted soil. It's also an indicator you have low calcium or high potassium. So it's going to try to regulate those nutrients as well. So it's always more beneficial to look at the plant that's there to see what it's trying, Mother Nature's trying to do. And that's she's just doing it to cover the soil, really. She wants the soil covered. You get the protection from the plants because the number one compaction for soil is rain compaction. It might not sound like that's what it would be, but rain droplets hit at 20 miles an hour, hit the soil. It's like a hammer impact. It's going to disperse and just constantly hit and compact and compact and compact. So the more you have your property or your area covered, your soil covered, the more protection you're going to have for your soil, the better the soil is going to be, the better the environment in that area is going to be. Some quick 5 tips, like I said, that are cheap, easy. A lot of it's just don't mess with it, really. I mean, you got the tip number 1, which is to mow 1/3 of the plant, or only 1/3 of the plant. Tip number 2 is to mow less often. Allow the plant to have a recovery period before you mow again. Tip number 3 was to reduce or eliminate chemicals and fertilizer, hopefully eliminate. Tip number 4 is to reduce soil disturbances or eliminate, hopefully eliminate, such as tilling. And then tip number 5 is cover your soil. It's all of those together is going to make your soil so much better, which in turn it's going to make your plants so much better. It's going to allow more nutrients. You're going to have more nutrient dense food. It's going to have healthier food, healthier plants, healthier soil. You're going to have more water retention, water penetration, and it's just going to overall do good. So thanks again for watching. I'm Donald with Copper Kettle Farms, and these were 5 cheap and easy tips on how to build your soil.
If you want to learn more about small-scale homesteading, natural medicine, or soil health, like and subscribe to get notified. And don't forget, don't treat your soil like dirt.